Welcome, everyone. Thanks so much for joining us today. My name is José Barzola. I'm the Conflict and Peace Specialist here at the University of Hawaii at Manoa. Today, we will be having our Advocacy for Social Justice Talk Story series, where we try to explore organized efforts and mechanisms for social change. Today's talk is about Peacebuilding Post-Disaster through an ALOHA Response with Pualani Enos, Paul Yamane, and moderated by myself. In today's session, Pualani will describe her experiences over the months preceding the wildfires in Maui and will provide some historical context prior to the wildfires. She will share stories of her journey in the practice of the ALOHA Spirit and introduce you to the Hawaiian sources who have shaped her leadership. She will facilitate a discussion how ʻIke Kupuna, ancestral knowledge, indigenous epistemology, and place-based frameworks have a unique power to transform conflict from complex trauma into community-informed solutions to benefit place, people, and future generations. About our speaker today, Pualani Enos, a passion for her place and her people fuels her purpose to utilize her 30 years of cross-sector work as an attorney, researcher, educator, community collaborator, and organizer to provide backbone support to small business, government, and nonprofit leaders in Hawaii. She supports their work as creatives to realize the positive change they can envision. By turning theory into practice, using systems thinking, design processes, impact network, and social action research frameworks, she relies on indigenous thinking and practices to support leaders to adapt and evolve in how they manage change. Pua is currently a lecturer with the Maui Institute for Peace at the University of Hawaii at Manoa, the co-CEO of the Native Hawaiian Philanthropy and the owner of Kaulia Creates, LLC. Pualani has genealogical and familial ties with the islands of Maui, Hawaii, Molokai, and Oahu. And she lives in upcountry Maui currently. Our other speaker today, Paul Yamane, is a second-year student here at the University of Hawaii at Manoa, pursuing a bachelor's in science in biology. He's originally born and raised on the island of Maui in Kihei. Paul originally took the course taught by Professor Enos, ʻIke Kupuna, Introduction to Contemporary Indigenous Frameworks for Transformative Social Change Across Disciplines. Just this past spring 2024 semester, he was inspired to approach the course with an open mind as a result of Professor Enos's passion for her work. Paul has learned about the ALOHA framework, how it has applications in many aspects of life, and has been enlightened to hear stories from many perspectives that have led to exploring different paths in understanding cultural humility and reaching solutions. We do also want to thank our co-sponsors today, the Maui Institute for Peace, Native Hawaiian Philanthropy, and myself as Conflict and Peace Specialist. Without further ado, I want to turn it over to Pua to take it away. And thank you.
Aloha, everyone. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen, which hopefully will work the way I need it to. I want to thank you all very much for spending this hour with us today. I know you probably have many, you can see all your names, and I'm sure there are many other things calling you. So I just, first of all, want to, acknowledge that, you're spending this time here today is a gift in itself. And I hope that your being here, will benefit you. My first call of duty has always been to do no harm. I began my career in the emergency department doing advocacy around domestic violence and child abuse. And so my hope is that what I can share with you today will share some of the sources that I find so dear and that have helped me in building myself as a leader and as a community member and as, human, parent, wife, daughter, sister. So while I will be talking about the disaster on Maui, I think we all, have access to a lot of the research related to what happened and kind of all the negative things. So, I'm kind of going to go that everyone knows some things about what happened through the fire on Maui and other disasters in Hawaii. But I'd like to focus on is, what I hold so dear, and I know many of you do, which is, what's worth protecting and what deserves our time and attention to try and prepare for a better future where we can reduce and mitigate, future disasters through indigenous thinking, through Hawaiian worldview. So I really want to thank Jose I wouldn't be here teaching. I wouldn't have done many of the things that I've done without his kind of trust and faith and encouragement. Because when I came to this job, I teach it much differently than I did when I taught at a law school and a clinic, and or when I'm talking at big lecture groups. So this really is more of a discussion format. So I will try and take some pauses, and I would love for people just to share whatever you would like. And I do believe from my sources that we're all here for a reason in this room, and we are all connected, and we're all one for this 50 minutes, and we're meant to be together. Nothing is an accident. So I'll go for it, but I also want to thank the Matsunaga Institute College of Social Sciences, Conflict and Peace Specialist, Jose Series, and Native Hawaiian Philanthropy, who has done a lot of disaster work, as well as planning for a lot more for the future around sustainability and positive change. So I'd like to first acknowledge Mary Kavena Pukui, who was born in 1895, just 2 years after our queen was overthrown. A new government took hold, and she was just revolutionary. She had she was blessed because her father, who was not Hawaiian, allowed her to be raised by her grandfather. And Kalamai, excuse me if many of you already know this information. I'm a product of diaspora. So I came to Hawaii as a 31-year-old, not really even requiring that people say my name properly. So I went throughout most of my life with people calling me things that sound nothing like my name is supposed to be said. And I was very disconnected. So when I returned to Hawaii, being, one of, thousands of people who never get to know their heritage, I hope that maybe if you already know these sources, that you can see them through fresh eyes through me. So this is kind of how I'd like to frame the talk today, and my reason for teaching, and my hope of how we can increase peace and respond to complex conflict that comes from complex traumas, like the fire, like many other traumas that we all have experienced. How can we, create these positive relationships that can then help us appreciate and malama, take care of what we have in order to get a little bit more of what we all need to have a healthier future. So ohe pau ka ʻike ka halau hoʻokahi. All knowledge is not learned in one school. So today I will focus on primarily Hawaiian sources because in my experience, they're rarely centered. It's taken me 20 years to collect most of these resources, and some of them I've just been introduced to recently. So one way that I try and practice aloha is to really honor our sources who went through so much to preserve our language and by using it. So I try and always find a little no'eau that can guide my work and encourage the students I work with and the people that I work with. And this is something I get from my kumuhula Sissy Lake farm. Her father is Papa Lake. And they have this very intricate process. I don't really have an intricate process. I basically open up the book and fly, or I've learned it from someone else. So today, whatever knowledge we all bring is important, and it may not seem aligned, and sometimes it may seem in conflict, but I would posit to all of you that perhaps we can come up with some new ways of doing things, to learn from the things that we don't want to happen again. If we can begin to listen to each other, get some time and space to reflect, where is my knowledge from? Where does this come from? And that will help us to move forward and deal with many traumas, including what's happened on Maui. So Jose introduced me the way I've always learned how to be introduced, which is what I learned from Pono Shim, is kind of a reference. What have I done? Who do I work for? Usually people talk about my degrees, and that's how I was raised. when I lived in the mainland in the East, you know, I lived in California, upstate New York, Washington, D.C., and then Boston, and worked in San Francisco. So in all of those places, I would usually introduce myself this way. What I'm sharing with you in this moment is precious to me because it took me a long time to figure out who do I come from, where do I come from, and you know, a Native daughter, Hanami Chas in the very beginning talks about kind of we are Hawaiians. We are not many other things that people will mix up. And as I'm doing work with Native Hawaiian philanthropy, I will go places and people don't even know that Hawaiians are real, that we exist, that we ever existed. It's more this kind of far distant place. So it is my pleasure that I learned from Dr. Kukahakalau how to do ho'olauna, which is to introduce myself. So for me, language is an ongoing process. I would say I'm kind of in a preschool parent competency. But basically, I was raised in Los Angeles, is where I was born. My moku is Kula, upcountry. And I think Paul's in Kihei, which is also the part of the same kind of Ahupua'a system. And then Mauna Leo is right above Waikapu and Maui. I live in Pualani. So I have my Mauna, I have where I live, and then Waikapu is the valley and the rivers that I associate because my family lived there. And then Puamana, which is part of Lahaina, which is a very special place where when I first came back to Maui, that was where one of my aunties took me with the ukulele, taught me how to sing that song. And truly my understanding of that song, of the people who wrote it, of the family who lived there, of my hula genealogy, you know, it's all a work in progress. But I think that's what I love about the Hawaiian culture, or the way I've been taught it by my kumu and my sources is, you know, you can always start from where you start. And it's kind of a process of moving through. And I wonder sometimes if what holds us back when we're trying to work to solve problems in any industry is that fear of not being enough, and that fear of not knowing enough and having to have all the answers. Whereas if we could all just bring what we had and have a more openness around learning, like I've tried to design in the class that I'm teaching, and that I feel so honored to teach. I wanted to start with this video, Kumaile's Molokai, and just share this with you for those of you who have never heard this phrase, aloha aku, aloha mai. And to point out that there really are a lot of wonderful free resources and open source language and cultural teaching for all of us. And I know that there are many that feel very ashamed, as I did, and I still do sometimes, that I'm not Hawaiian enough, I don't know enough, my language sounds silly because I was raised in Southern California, and I don't know that I'll ever completely rid myself of my kind of Valley girl. But when I can just, appreciate and where I am and the open learning, it helps. So let me share this with you.
Violina me ke aloha, I'm Kumumailina Ehu, coming to you from Kahale Hoaka on the island of Molokai. Our mana'o mane o lelo no eau is Aloha aku, aloha mai. Do it with me. Aloha aku, aloha mai. And if you notice, I'm using my hands when I do it, because when we aloha aku, it means to give love, when love is given. And the second part of it is love should be returned, or aloha mai. Let's do it all together one more time. Aloha aku, aloha mai. It's the law of the universe. Whatever energies we put out into the universe will come back, sometimes even tenfold. So why not send out aloha? Mai kai. Our ha'awina o lelo Hawaii for today is the word aina. Say it with me, ha'oia. Aina. Mai kai loa. And the root word of aina is ai. Ai means to feed. It also means food that comes from our land. Aina means the one which feeds So let's say it together. It's such a beautiful word. Oia, aina.
So this is another, if you're interested, they have many different programs. So feel free to check those out. So how many of you, if we could have a raise of hands, I'll try and change to gallery view for a second. Oh no, that's not it. Of how many people have heard of this aloha aku and aloha mai, the way that Kumu Maile just described it. Can we just have like a raise of hands? Okay, let me chime in. Okay. So this kind of gets me into the next piece of, so around the disaster, because it involves our aina and our relationship with aina, I think us being really clear for each of us, what is our connection to aina? For some of us, it's for some of us, it's a place that we purchased, it's a place that we relocated to, and then for others of us, it is actually a part of us. So I wanted to just mention my primary source for my description and how I describe aloha, which is from Auntie Pilahi Paki. And in 1986, she went to the Constitutional Convention and she made it happen that ALOHA Spirit was actually put into our Hawaii revised statutes. And it is because she believed that we need to look to our kupuna for our ancestors for examples of aloha and respect, because at some point our world will be in search of peace and that we have the key. And so it was really her gift to the Hawaiian people. And many people that I have talked to are not familiar with her. So she is our primary source. And because I have an ethics focus and when in my class, one of the primary things is to honor whoever is influencing our work and be able to share, that is our source. So that when we're talking to others, we can also kind of acknowledge what is your source. So this is how it's broken down. And, I've done a lot of work with the government, and most of the people who are actually kind of charged with practicing this, which is all of our leaders, our judges, our civic leaders, people who work for the government, really aren't familiar with this. And so this is how I frame the class, is how can we, with kindness, how can we, work towards unity and unbrokenness with harmony? How do we practice being agreeable and pleasant? How can we manifest and show humility and modesty and patience and perseverance? So, at first glance, of course, we all try and do these things. And one of the students was saying, I began thinking this is really about, just being a general good person. But what Auntie Pilahi taught was that it is actually practicing these things in every single moment, and that is what will create peace, and I love Jose's definition of peace building, which is creating positive connections and positive relationships and engagement. So that's my definition that I've taken to. So one thing I wanted to share is, she says, these are traits of character that express the charm, warmth, and sincerity of Hawaii's people. It was a working philosophy of Native Hawaiians and was presented as a gift to the people of Hawaii. And it talks about mutual regard and affection and the essence of relationships. So another definition of peace, right, is described by the United Nations. So years ago, the UN Political Forum created these 17 Sustainable Development Goals. And I had never heard of them until I started doing disaster work. But I'm sure when you look at each of these, many of you on the call have been working on these issues around justice and equity and creating a better life. So I want you to just for a second look at the different 17 boxes and kind of acknowledge what work you've been doing, prior or over your career or in your life or with your family. and the relevance that it has. Oh, and so this is in Bradford's article, so you can come back to the video and look at it. It's a really beautiful article that talks about what it means to create inclusiveness. And we hear, you know, diversity, equity, inclusion, justice, equity, diversity, inclusion. There's all, you know, there's a lot of words, but what does that look like to us, and what are we willing to do? And I guess one of the things that I'm trying to figure out in all of the research that I've done in my life, and the community work, you know, public service work as an attorney, you know, what are the conditions that are going to allow each of us to contribute our best to work together? Because I think we can all agree, no one entity, no one industry is going to be able to do that. So when I first started working to support the founder, Ku'ule Maunupau, of Native Hawaiian Philanthropy, to start developing a place where we could access resources and get it to our most high-performing Hawaiians, to help not only Hawaiians, but everyone in Hawaii using a Hawaii worldview, I found this pressure model, which is actually 20 years old. And, you know, I was asked to come and speak at a conference about disaster on Maui. And, you know, I'm really new to working in disaster, but I think this is, like, to me, basically root causes, you know, equals the hazard equals like a disaster. So if we could cut down, right, and limit the root causes that create these unsafe conditions, then we, whatever hazards, flooding, you know, sea level, ocean, wind, hurricane, whatever it is, if we could kind of get our heads around this, right, and keep working in those 17 sustainable development goals, that would reduce our vulnerabilities. And unfortunately, things like poverty and being a person of color makes us more, we tend to be impacted more. So here is a map on the left of Maui. I remember on Hawaiian Air, we would always get these maps. And they're used for tourism. You know, when people come to visit, this is kind of what we see is this one, right? But if you look at the bottom right, this depicts traditional stewardship and the ahupua'a systems and the way resources were managed. And as you can see, there's kind of these purple, there's these lines from sometimes from the mountain to the ocean. But basically the concept is we all take care of our own space. We do not go outside of our own space for resources. We use whatever we have to manage, and we all take care of each other in this more localized way. So one of the ways that Native Hawaiian Philanthropy has been doing its disaster work with partners within and outside of Hawaii is how can we use indigenous Hawaiian methodologies and worldview in order to get the resources that are coming in to those far-reaching places who often don't get, and then how can we use them to, you know, reduce the to mitigate the risk in the future. So this is a picture of the ahupua'a system, which kind of, I would say, I see similarity between the SDGs and what we're trying to do, but we break it down by kind of acknowledging all the different sources in the system. And in all of my work, I've always believed that human capital, each of us, what we bring, our gifts, that if we could share those gifts and just do our part and kind of follow this 4,000-year proven way of stewarding research that our resources, that we could work together. So because I don't have a lot of time to describe this, I did want to share Auntie Hopu Lani Holt is a Maui treasure. She's one of our leading kupuna and elders. And this does a very good job at kind of explaining Hawaiian concepts and how we might be able to use these things to inform and supplement our planning. And as you can see, this is, you know, the Lahaina side. So I wanted to also mention her because she was the first person who taught me about lokahi. It was when she was working at the Maui Arts and Cultural Center, and she did not need to meet with me. There were plenty of people asking for her time. I knew nothing, and she spent about 2 hours with me describing some very basic things, but that was probably one of my first introductions to the value of lokahi, and I will be forever grateful to her for that. And then this is how Pono Shem is how I learned about this Aloha framework. I saw this video of him with Leslie Wilcox, and I want to also just show my gratitude to Leslie Wilcox, because I've basically gotten to know most of my sources through interviews that she did with them, because they have passed before I came back to Hawaii. And if you have a chance to look at this video, it will give you kind of a much more in-depth version. And then I just wanted to acknowledge Martin Chinnan, who was my program manager at Office of Youth Services when I first started working at the nonprofit Huima Lama in 2006. Yeah, that was a long time ago. But he really honored my wanting to integrate Hawaiian things into the work at Huima Lama, and there was a lot of resistance. It had been a very long time since anyone who was Hawaiian had worked for that agency, and there weren't many Hawaiian things. So I'm happy to say I saw one of their RFPs out of Office of Youth Services recently, and ALOHA Spirit is actually integrated into their request for proposals and the service work that they do. So I just wanted to acknowledge these folks. And Pono also introduced me to our queen. And this group, Ohana o Nawahine, they did a beautiful video on her birthday, if anyone is interested in looking at that. But I wanted to share, this is kind of the mantra that I tell myself whenever I feel worried and scared and want to give up, we must never cease to act because we fear we may fail. And the way to lose any earthly kingdom is to be inflexible, intolerant, and prejudicial. But the other way is to be too flexible, tolerant of too many wrongs, and without judgment at all. It is a razor's edge, it is the width of a blade of grass. So to gain the kingdom of heaven is to hear what is not said, to see what cannot be seen, and to know the unknowable. That is aloha. All things in this world are two, but in heaven there is one. And what Auntie Pilahi Paki told Pono, what she shared with me, is the sentiment from our queen was not that we should all be good here so that when we go to heaven, everything will be one, but that we should work very hard on this earth. And she was one of the greatest examples of this, of practicing all of these, even in the face of being upended by the people she trusted most. And then giving to those same places in order to make a better Hawaii, and building a lot of institutions that were not kind to her, it would be a benefit for all the people of Hawaii. So this is kind of setting the context of why I teach the class, how important I think storytelling is, and really my goal with this class is to create a space where it's a learning culture, where we can create learning networks that will then inform our performance network. So throughout my career, I worked a lot within collaborations and partnerships, and it's very challenging to work with other humans for sure, right? It's, but it can also be such a gift. So can we find a way that rather than always being pressured to do only what we know and what we've done, can we take a break and have some space to reflect? Who are our sources? What do we think? And have clarity. And then can we practice communicating in writing and orally, thinking about how that went, so that then we can share our stories with others in a way that doesn't hurt them, where we're actually practicing grace and patience and kindness and those aloha spirits. So I'm going to turn it over to Paul to talk about his experience in the class. Thank you, Paul, for joining us.
Yeah, thank you. Hi, everyone. So my name is Yamane. I'm an incoming junior at UH Manoa. So I just finished up my second semester of my sophomore year, where I took PACE 485 with Professor Enos. And I'm also born and raised on Maui, from the south side of Maui. I grew up in ʻIke. And so a little bit about my experience with Professor Enos in this course is that, heading into this course right off the bat, I could see Professor Enos's passion for her work and the format of the course. And well, the format of the course was not necessarily something I was used to. So the ALOHA framework that she mentioned was an integral part of the course. And I remember a couple of the first journals that Professor Enos had asked us, what do we know about ALOHA and what it meant? And sitting back and thinking, I felt quite embarrassed, coming from Maui and being raised there. I felt I hadn't even had an operational definition of what it meant beyond a simple greeting and sign of respect. And the way the course was formatted is that we were exposed to various sources of different cultures, from readings of articles, books, podcasts, and videos, where each week we followed a theme related to the ALOHA framework. And we would complete a written and oral journal pretty much every day. And what I found quite unique about Professor Enos's approach to this course and the course in general was her ability to foster this safe and encouraging environment to have us students be able to express our own thoughts, our own individual thoughts, and also embrace the struggle in this process that was very new to, I'm assuming, most students. And I think Professor Enos also emphasized that the process of oral journaling and written journaling, it's going to feel uncomfortable at first, but if you just embrace that discomfort, there will be that breakthrough, whether it be slow or gradual or maybe immediate. But for me, it took a bit of a learning curve with this daily journaling, especially as a STEM major. Much of my classes require you to take an objective perspective where this is how it is and this is how it's most likely going to always be like. And whereas this class was asking me what I thought and how I perceived my own cultural humility. So that's where I sort of struggled with towards the beginning of the course. And for me, there was really no class prior to taking this course that allowed me to explore myself and allow me to surface my weaknesses and reflect on parts of my life that I probably would have never returned to without the building of these written and oral stories connected to the ALOHA framework. As I've grown, I'd like to think that I've matured. So looking back in retrospect helped me gather my thoughts and see where I'd gone wrong when I was receiving feedback from my different stories. So I've taken courses before where there were certain agendas being pushed upon us students. And of course, there were things that I agreed with, but there were also other ideas that I hadn't agreed with. And it was pretty clear that my writings were catered to the TAs and the professors and what they wanted to hear, rather than me being able to express my own true thoughts. So progressing through the course, I was pleased to make these connections of the ALOHA framework to outside of the course, because ultimately I believe that's what the goal was in learning about the ALOHA framework. So to take these values and implement them into your relationships, your work life, your school life, pretty much every avenue of your life. And the journals really helped with daily practice. And I think it took me to take that initiative to want to learn and take value out of this course. But once I did, I found that this daily practice of journaling helped with implementing these ALOHA values with, most importantly, conscious thought and intent. And I think with most people like myself, it's quite easy to fall into a habit and routine where you forget to ask yourself, why are you doing this? And with Professor Enos's encouragement to all of us students to say, hey, I understand you're taking these other courses. I don't want you to look at this course as just chasing a letter grade or another chore that you have to dread. So it was really helpful in changing my perspective on this course. And now I was the other half of the job where it takes your own individual will to say, okay, maybe I can take something valuable from this course, which I did. And through continual exposure to these values, I found that these ALOHA values really intertwine with one another and seem to promote just a life of integrity and truth. And the fact that there's also this beauty of balance to everything in life. And I think what I mean by balance is that these values teach a holistic approach to life, fostering harmony in your relationships, like with Lokahi and Akahai. And I think one of my whys, or why I hope to try and practice these values in my life, came to me in a moment where I recall an interview with Pono Shim that Professor Enos had mentioned earlier, where he mentions in his experience with having this moment of ha'a, where he realizes this is his moment to approach this shaky conversation with his colleagues, where they struggle to understand the importance of values when policy and governance seem to be sufficient enough in leading a business. So he goes on to explain this values argument, and where having your values in order allows everything else to follow through. And that translates to I think that translates to everything that you do in life. And he believed that that was an integral part of leading a community of integrity rather than what he called a community of degradation. And so I found that pretty meaningful, because as an aspiring dentist wanting to go into healthcare, it's really important to understand why I chose to go into that field and make sure where my values are at, and understand that these are live patients, that I need to have a balance between having that objective perspective as a STEM major, being able to engineer patient-specific treatments from that scientific perspective, but also make sure that my values are in line, and using the ALOHA framework to nurture a safe environment for my patients. So yeah, that was my experience with Professor Enos in this course, and I think it was a delightful experience.
Thank you so much, Paul. And truthfully, I hope Uncle Pono is, I'm too close in age probably to call him Uncle, but that was in the chat. But as you have probably guessed, this class is a gift to me, and in all of my practice with Pono Shim, I was in his first Higher Skills Academy, and I thought, that he was going to shower all his knowledge on me, and I was going to be so much better and be able to practice ALOHA easily by listening to his beautiful stories. And the first day we all got together, there were 9 of us. He started handing out these journals with a pen. I was like, what are we doing? And he said, yep, you're going to journal every day on this value for a month. And then we're going to talk. And then we'll get together and we'll each share one story. I was like, yeah. And I had never journaled. I really did not want my innermost thoughts in a book where someone else could read it. It felt very strange to me that no one was going to read them. I could just talk to people. But what I learned through that experience, as hard as it was sometimes, is that for me, I believe that oftentimes what we think is a communication problem is a clarity problem, because we aren't given the time and space to really sit and consider how we implement our values, what are the conditions we're trying to implement our values around. And I will always be so grateful to Pono Shim, because we would talk once a week, and that happened for years. And his passing was such a loss that I tell you, I can hear him in my head. There are many things. I can hear him laugh at me. I'm driving up the street. There's all these new people up country Maui after the fire. Everyone's bought all this property in their speed cars, and they put the stickers like the Puno, practice ALOHA. And I'm driving up and I'm just like ranting to myself, so frustrated, like, that is not aloha, you know? And then I realized the sticker's for me. I heard Pono, the sticker's for you, not for them. How are you gonna practice aloha in this moment? Because getting all bent out of shape, right, isn't gonna help. And learning the exchange of aloha was something that I have gotten tenfold. So you know that aloha aku, aloha mai. I have usually 20 students. This time I taught 3 sections, so I had close to 3 times that. And I tell you, the smidget of whatever goodness I give out, I get back 100-fold. And I learn so much, and everything I read from them, their insights are so beautiful. And it really causes me, and I don't understand what they're talking about, to pause and to wait for it. Like, wait for it. And it will happen. Just kind of like it, you know, Paul was talking about in many of the professional circles I'm in, it feels like we're all so busy trying to do that we're really not sure the why. We don't have time to ask the right questions. So another thing that is an integral part of the class is that we're only allowed to ask questions, and all the feedback I give are questions. And that is a very challenging thing. And so I have to have meetings with everyone, or I try to have one-on-ones to say, when I'm asking you, why do you think that? I'm not saying like, why do you think that? Which is what I'm used to hearing. You know, when I'm asked that question, I'm saying, oh, why do you think that? And I'm interested. And even though I could guess and place my assumptions, I really want to know. And over time, the students don't really hear each other's stories until the last week of class. And they hear one story. And I tell you, the way they engage with each other and the questions they're asking, because they're supposed to ask questions to clarify their understanding of that person's understanding, not to impose, not to agree, not to congratulate, but to really deeply understand the other person. And I think one of the points I'd like to make in this talk is that oftentimes we hear, like, I just want to share my voice, I want to be heard. But I wonder if the true gift is just that active listening and what you get from hearing other people's stories to help you make sense of what it is you're trying to grapple with, because we have some complex problems and a lot of complex conflicts right now. And I think, you know, one of the students ended her story with, I heard charity's supposed to begin at home. So, you know, do we show aloha to those in closest proximity? I've spent a career caring about people that I don't know, honestly, the collective, people I'll never meet, actually, even. And then it took me a while to really recognize how important it is to show that same love and aloha to every person I come in contact with on a daily. Jose, did you want to ask, or I guess I'll just, do people have any comments or questions that you want to add at this point? I know some of you have done promotions, you know, higher skills, so I would love to hear from you if anyone's willing to share, or ask Paul any questions or comment to him.
I have allowed it, so if folks want to unmute themselves, you're welcome to it. I do want to just briefly, before folks jump in, just want to thank you so much for being so open to seeing where this journey goes, finding the interconnectedness where it doesn't feel as though there may be some. I love the highlights on the reflection and the journaling. I think about my own training. I was trained, I was a little over 10 years ago, I got trained as a mediator facilitator back in New York. And as I was also sitting in on a faculty took me under their wings to be like, oh, would you want to come back and teach a class on managing human conflict? And as I sat in the class and learned about it, I was like, a big portion of the class was like the introspection, the journaling, and how essential that is. And so, although it is not, you know, that training was not based on Kanaka Maoli practices. I love how even, yes, there's so many beauties in everything that we all have to bring, but there's also lots of interconnectedness that we can find. And even though, I mean, just by the fact of us getting to know each other over these past few years, and from our first conversation and the energy you showcased about wanting to, take on this new stage of life and teaching, and you have been very gracious with your time, very wonderful to just pivot as because I feel like that's a big portion of life. We pivot based on it. And also I think being receptive to it's never too late to learn. And I think that's really at the core of what you're doing is you're facilitating conversations around knowledge that you've attained, sharing it with your students, but at the same time being open to learning from them too and seeing how then that evolves your own journey as well. So I just want to say thank you. Thank you for all you do. And but I know there's a plethora of folks that want to jump in with questions. So I'll let them take it on. We have some wonderful comments from our audience. Let's see.
Oh, I can't do two things. So
It's
yeah.
okay. I'll read for you. Yeah. Someone mentioned, I love your style of welcoming all levels of knowledge and acknowledging those who helped you. Your vision for running this cultural lens across work in all areas is awesome. I'm going to mispronounce this, Nyamihi, which means in Maori, thank you for sharing. And then someone's like, Nakalapono is smiling on all of us in these shared spaces and experiences. Mahalo for this opportunity and time. I couldn't help but look up really quickly. It's been a little over 2 years since we lost Pono. And so I love that, students who never are still being introduced to his skills and his knowledge base. And so they too will carry it on forward wherever, their journeys may go. And Paul kind of gave some great examples of that. Somebody else mentioned that I am blessed to attend an online talk on Pono Shim back in 2021-2022. I learned from him some basics about living aloha as he talks story, revealing his personal history and his kupuna. He shared about the 100-foot view of interactions, which encompasses every participant and viewpoint. Today, seeing Queen Iukalani's quote about oneness from 1917, the tradition continues today right here. So mahalo nui loa for all being here and sharing your mana today. Just
those kind words mean so much. And it's so nice to be in the same room with people who care about the same things and moving us forward. And I hope we can have more spaces where we can do this, where we can come together and everyone gets a chance to share their mana'o. And yeah.
I think part of it is also you don't say it, but I've observed that you're also pushing back to the traditional mindset of what is considered teaching, of the mindset of like, I'm here to regurgitate data, to give you quizzes. You're doing an individualized approach to each individual. You're kind to say you had, the reality is this past semester you had close to 60 students, and being able to provide that individual time, I know is something priceless and wonderful that they value. And even if they haven't said it, they will down the road. And it's not, I think my mindset's always like, there's so many things that are interconnectedness. I think about my own, teaching style and how you never know, like 2, 3, 10 years down the road, how all of a sudden you might have kids of your students, in your classes. You might run into them, especially teaching in an online asynchronous format. You may run into them wherever the journey may go.
Oh, that makes me think of two
Your
things.
dentist for all yeah.
So one thing is, if it weren't for you, Jose, I would never have asked Paul. So I'm asking him, like, you don't have to, no pressure, but if you would, that'd be so awesome. And, it's so weird as a teacher to ask, and so I love that I have learned a lot about what it means to be like inclusive. And, but I mean, Paul will tell you, the beginning, my students are not happy. They're DMing about me, and they're like, trash, you know, they're like, this lady's nuts. And I remember that, and it takes so much discipline to not help. I remember one community organizer, I think it was Marshall Gantz, he said, do not help people. No one needs your help. Let them do their own. And so I'm watching it. And then when I see, and for some people it takes a week, for some people it takes 6. For some people, I'm still working with them now. And we didn't, because my belief is time is just time. And I learned that from a Maori person and then from a Tongan person. Both of them said, you keep saying not enough time, good time, bad time, but time is just time. And for each of us, we are on our own journey. And I think I never, you know, I was never in a space with another Hawaiian person until I was 30 years old. I had not come across another Hawaiian. And my ability to assimilate, and I grew up in trauma, you know, in my home as a very young child, so I can stay in the room and I can please everybody. But what happens, I think, with that is you can become very accomplished and people can see you in a certain way and you've done things, but when it comes like important that you got to solve a problem that requires some creativity and real innovation, I was lost because I was just so busy telling people what they wanted to hear. And like, again, and it's not that I didn't learn some very wonderful things, but my hope is that for all of us in every space that we work, that there doesn't have to be so much shame about not having an answer or asking questions. And I really appreciate all of you for giving me this time and space today and being here. And hope is that we'll come across each other. Paul, did you want to add anything else, or?
No, you covered just about everything.
And the one thing that one student did share with me, and he said, I just kept blowing it off because I just thought like, well, fine, if I can say whatever, I'll just turn it in. But he said what had happened, because he's also STEM, he's a like molecular biology, something like pretty intricate. And he has a lot of classes where he was now an upper level, has to work in teams. And his first story was about how much he hated working in teams. And there were many other stories about how hard it is because you do your part, no one else does their part, which reminds me of when I was little. Between me and my sister, I always did the dishes and she always did the dishes. And my mom would say, like, you can't both always do it. Right? So it's that, but he said that while he was kind of ignoring my class and did a lot of that at the end, he was implementing the practices from every week. And he made friends in all of his classes. And they actually started to work together. So Auntie Pilahi Paki and our Kupuna, they really did know what they were talking about. I think we all have to come to it in our own way and space, and give each other some grace and love as we're, you know, I can't remember his name now. His last name is Tahane, but I can't remember his first name. But he talks about balancing power and love, and that you need both. And Martin Luther King has a beautiful quote about it. But they talks about, like, first you have to crawl, then you cannot stumble. And walking is probably not within my lifetime, but that you're always balancing agency and wanting to like execute with harmony and love. And you got to balance like on that peely grass, and it's not easy work. So thank you so much, all of you.
We did have a question. I just want to, so someone in the audience asked, you know, schools often don't ask students to reflect daily. They're also not asked to dig into their own identities, yet we can see how important this is, how much growth happens. So at first, there is pushback by students. And at what point do you see a shift? Is there a particular story or lesson that supports the transformation that you've observed or noticed?
I mean, so there is, I have to be tougher than I usually am, because when people, you know, the course is designed so they feel stressed and they have to practice it under stress. But I get, you know, there's a lot of kind of like, why do you use the Google Classroom that way? My other teachers don't do this, you know, and there's a lot of critique and kind of frustration at first. And then, you know, I really didn't know if it would be approved for the 4 focuses. I was really worried that my creating a progress metric rather than a performance metric would be rejected. But I was so pleasantly surprised by, the university, and I don't know how many universities would have actually kind of gone in this direction. So my answer is, I don't know that it's pushback. I would say it's just when our brains don't know something, right? There's the fight, flight, or freeze. And I just need to wait long enough for that heightened anxiety to kind of pull back. And I tell you though, what is the craziest experience for me, which I never have shared the first time, is the work that people think is junk and they want to edit and fix is the most gorgeous, beautiful product. I mean, it is just, and when I actually have to walk them through it, I have to tell them why it's so beautiful. I mean, if you give it with Paul, when I give you feedback, he's like, really? And their faces sometimes are like, it really is cognitive dissonance. And so I wonder how often that happens to all of us, that we have a brilliant idea, we have an insight, but because we haven't had someone kind of reflect back to us how valuable it is, we just kind of like, like breathing, we don't, need that. And once people can see that, and that's just because I've had editors. So it wasn't until I worked in law school when I was publishing, but once I had an editor, oh my goodness, my writing got so much more clear and I got more clear. And so I do edits with them. I give them actual that they can reject or accept, but it's just I think it's in the questions that I'm asking, they can see how buoyant they truly are when we give ourselves a moment to kind of, what do you call, like loan me in, I guess. Yeah, that answer. Oh, did you want to answer?
Yeah, so I mean, you kind of touched on the fact that there's that struggle that a lot of the students face, whether it be they struggle throughout the entire course or maybe they just struggled for a week. But for me, I found that allowing her the way she formatted the course and having that safe environment, that learning environment, it allowed me to be more comfortable in sitting in that struggle and just sitting in that place and kind of figuring it out on my own. And that even translated to other aspects of my life. For example, this past semester, along with taking this course, I just started a new job as a tutor. And it was organic chemistry, so it's a little bit of a complex subject. And I had done well in the subject, but I didn't know if I had known enough of the material. Was I smart enough to even teach this to another student? That when I just took the subject last semester, so I struggled with that kind of. But with Professor Enos's encouragement to just sit with that struggle and understand that I don't know everything and that's okay, and be able to realize my weaknesses, it helped me grow and take that sort of growth mindset. And when I'm teaching the students, maybe there's something that I don't completely understand, and I try to be transparent with them, and we try to maybe work out a solution thoroughly, and it really helps being able to first spot that weakness. So that really helped with my course and tutoring.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I think a big portion is providing the space to learn that and to acknowledge folks for what they have to contribute is what I'm hearing. And you're right. I mean, there's so many societal pressures of like gender norms, like societal norms, like just different things that forever we see things a certain way. And so we want everyone else to basically have that same perspective. And sometimes the education system perpetuates that by just not allowing the space for critical thinking, not allowing the space for journaling, for practicing gratitude within, in challenging the quote unquote status quo. And because, I mean, that's how we get new ideas. That's how we get new spaces we can step into. That's kind of how we build compassion and empathy so that we can build some healthy communities, stronger relationships with each other. If we just keep perpetuating the divisiveness, or the hierarchies that we have set up within our different organizational structures, it makes it a lot more challenging to come together and explore new innovative ways. So thank you for providing that space. That's really just
And
wonderful.
I do want to acknowledge though that there are, and most of my students are not liberal arts, they're all science and math, I think because of the 4 focuses. I realize that there are many classes that do have to be taught in a very particular way. There are correct answers. And so I do want to acknowledge and appreciate that. And just, I feel so grateful that I am able to teach in this space. I'm a lecturer, so I also don't have the same pressures as faculty, tenure track, tenured. I don't have to respond to an entire department or, you know, a whole industry because I'm just a lecturer. So it's easier, I think, for me to have to create a different kind of space. But I hope that, you know, I had one other science student say that his professor had said, I want you to start today as though you know nothing for the whole lab. And everyone was rolling their eyes because they were all, you know, I don't usually do graduate students, but there was an exception for this reason. And so she said that it was nagging at her, all of these sources saying, you know, empty, the teacher's telling you, right, to just empty. And she said she did, and she learned so much, but also she was so most happy because she's the only one that didn't get scoldings, because everyone else just could not do that. They could not forget what they knew. They had a really hard time starting from scratch. So, I mean, I'm sad that it's my reward as well, is to not get scoldings, you know, and then to be embarrassed when I don't do something correctly. But I think there are all these ways to crosswalk, like Paul referenced, of how we can just like having that, you know, just my class is also very like detail oriented and there's a lot of engagement. So it isn't for everyone because they don't want to have that much. And I want to acknowledge Paul to come here and talk about, you know, there were many students who didn't want to even share their stories because they were so personal or their experience. And I am so grateful, Paul, for you to come. And as a resident of Maui, and I really enjoyed, you know, your first story about your dad in baseball was one kind of a more superficial, and by the end, the way you appreciated your father and you could make all of those connections as to why you believe a lot of what you believe. I hope my kids could learn that about me someday in 12 weeks. Oh, no, I mean.
Aloha Pualani, mahalo. Thank you so much. I spent most of my life living with Kupuna and made films about them, which are now being seen because the younger generations want to see them and have time with the Kupuna who practice the culture. And all I wanted to say is that, you know, when you started with Maui, Maui reached the hearts of everyone in the whole world. And that kind of aloha for people that you don't know and people who don't know you shows the power of aloha. And aloha is an energy field. And that's why when we take the time to share aloha with each other, it increases that energy field. And what I would like to say about for the people of Maui, because many of us still cry every day for our families there because they're not being listened to. They're still homeless. They're still not given the money to pay for what they've lost. They're still being treated as if that is not their homeland. And for the people, especially who are Maoli, it's their homeland for, like you were saying, 6,000 years. So some of the things that we need to correct with aloha is to build our energy fields to correct things as they happen. There were many cascading traumas that created the fires of Maui. But when you look at a photograph, like you showed the different maps that were so beautiful, there's a map that you can also look at of all the streams on each island. And when you look at the streams of Maui, you see they're all in the north. And so the areas in the south don't have the water anymore. And this is what the people of Maui have been saying from Lahaina. 3 main things. We don't have our water to protect us, our vai, our source of life. We don't have the resources to live in this economy. And we need people to come and help us, to give us the best of what we need to make this right. And one of the women that you hear over and over again, who is so articulate, is saying, you know, if the water flowed where it is supposed to flow, there would not have been the trauma. And so we have to look at our society in terms of action. Aloha is not only reflection and thought, it's self-correction. And it comes from that deepest connection with what is our intention, what is our action, and what is our outcome. And when we learn that that is all one circle of truth, then our intentionality becomes more powerful because we know that it leads to a more powerful outcome. But when more of us are sharing that energy field, it's stronger. And I feel that Maui is trying to teach us and the whole world that this is the level of consciousness that we all have to be on the earth now. Wisdom comes from higher consciousness. We can't just wish it be so. We have to actually move there. So I want to mahalo you so much, and Jose and Paul, for having us all come and share this experience with each other. And I want us to really think about the island of Maui as it is for all of us on earth right now. It's a precariousness. And when we think in terms of who we are everywhere on earth right now, we're facing the same things. So that kind of collective consciousness brings us together in a different way that provides us with the opportunity to create peace. Because we need the peace to create the solutions, to recreate the stability, to recreate the protection of regenerative life, and all the things that are needed on earth right now. Human beings have a great consciousness, but often stay at a low level. And what we really need to do now is to accelerate and amplify the optimization of consciousness. So I want to thank you so much for inviting us all to come today and for sharing the experiences that you have and for involving the students and everybody of every generation together, because it's the respect for all generations of each other that's going to help us create that oneness that will allow us to have the power to face what we have to face at this time on earth. Mahalo.
I'm so glad you were on this call, Nalani. You just like packaged those thoughts in a way that is so hard to do. And I've heard a lot of people speaking about disaster, but I am going to be sharing this video with many of people to hear how you kind of put all of that together. Because I never heard of like that repair. I heard about it on a talk this morning that I'm on, repairing or reparative work. But I think that's what you're talking of. Like they were mentioning, it's action. It's not just thinking and talking. So,
well, it's what you were saying, Pualani, about when your mind is not integrated, because you're in a state of trauma or you're in a wounded child state of having not evolved from, let's say, a violent childhood, which all of us have different experience of violence and abuse and trauma in our lives. But when you're in those states, you're not integrated in the same way because of the fright, flight, and freeze response, which is brain chemistry. It's not a choice, it's brain chemistry. But one way out of the brain chemistry is to connect. And by connecting, and this is why I use education, I am the director of 2 programs in health. But one of them has graduated now 555 indigenous nurses for the first time in UH or US history. And the thing that surprises me about that is that for indigenous peoples and all peoples who are at risk, which, you know, right now we're kind of all traumatized all over the whole world. We have to realize that we have to consciously integrate, because the amygdala response is a brain chemistry control. And to override it, you have to learn new things, you have to reflect differently, you have to self-correct, you have to do all the things that you and Paul and Jose and others have spoken about today in order to override that inaction. The way that we heal ourselves is through action. So the first steps of being able to think about these things and to feel them and to integrate new knowledge within ourselves gives us the capacity to do that with others. And this is what peace building really is. It's not that we all have to believe exactly the same thing, but there are universal energies like aloha, which reach the whole world. It reaches the whole world by itself. The love of Maui and the people of Maui and Hawaii reaches the whole world by itself. You don't have to go around and tell everybody. They feel it. And this is the level that, you know, human beings really have, is a feeling level that leads to a higher state, because it's compassion that lives within us. And I'm just happy that at the university and everywhere in Hawaii, we have more compassion, you know, that we're expressing to each other, because I really feel like that is the key to us understanding our capacity to heal.
Absolutely. And that so beautifully said. And if you wouldn't mind putting in maybe or mentioning a couple of the names of your movies, I would love to.
Oh, it's the films. Yeah, I was so shocked because some students came from Sweden looking for me because I had made these films like 35 years ago. But the reason that I made them was because I knew I didn't have the capacity to remember everything they were saying, and they wanted to say so much. So I asked them, is it okay if we film you so that other people understand the generations that lived the culture, how they feel, how they think, how they make decisions, because this is what we need to know. And they all wanted to. So the one film, ʻAhuaʻa Fish Ponds and Lo'i, is an hour and a half long. And I made it that long so that you can break it into 30-minute sections. And this went out last summer into different communities. And after Maui fires, the conversations were much different. But it was leaders and politicians and farmers and fishermen and students and little kids and grandparents all came to these community centers to see clips of the film and then to talk about it and to talk about how Hawaiian culture and values are alive in their community. And community by community, even though this is a film that was made so long ago, but it's because of that people are seeking to know. They don't have the same kupuna with them that lived the culture as we did when we were growing up. Another film is called Amau Amau, and maybe I can speak with you and Jose another time about us showing that film because it honors John Kaimikawa. And what John is telling us about in the film Amau Amau is how aloha and our values can live forever. And the film is made on Molokai, where he had hoped in his lifetime to create the schools of knowledge that came from the time that he lived in. And of course, each island and each community has their own mana'o and their own mana. But yeah, it's the voice of the kupuna that's reaching people so much now, just as you honor Pono, Shem, and others who spent a lot of time with the kupuna. It's us who help to carry what they've given us forward, but sometimes when younger people see the kupuna for themselves and experience the culture in that way, in the way that they expressed it, it's so beautiful because it was part of their daily life, you know, to honor everything around them as a world of beauty and wonder, as a world of miracles and magic. And they asked permission for everything they did, and they shared everything they had. And they gave and gave and gave and gave because their principle and value of life is that if everyone is giving, everyone is receiving. So aloha is what moves us all, but mahalo so much for asking me about the films, and I would love to show them sometime if you guys want to get together and do that.
Love that.
Definitely. I will follow up with you.
Okay, great.
So much. You have beautifully, I think, summed up everything, and I have no other words, but thank you so much.
I know that was so good. There was one
Uh,
poem I wanted to share if I do have time before we end, unless someone has something they wanted to share before we end. Can I try?
the poetry is what our audience says, so go for it.
I just love also like music, and I have a music video too, but I know that might. So we'll see where we're at. So hold on, let me get to where. Okay. Oh shoots. Well, I must have gone out of my Google. Okay. I'm gonna go down here. And I'll read it. So this is a song I did want to share with you, but let me instead get to this. Okay, because I think we're running out of time, right? We can finish with the music video, but so this book was given to me by one of my aunties who has been such an angel to me. I was kind of tasked with hanging out with her because one of her family members was working, but the truth is the gift was all to me. She was like medicine for me, and she gave me this book, and just like aunties can do, she said, like, I did not read this book. I got it a long time ago. You need to read it, and we'll talk about it next week. So I did, and it's basically was a Quaker organization in 1992. This is when I was graduating from college. And they went and just collected stories, kind of like you were saying, Nalani, like just it was like a talk story book about what sovereignty means to people. And Auntie Pualani Burgess wrote this poem, and I just, people often ask, and there actually is a YouTube that I could send out to everyone. I forget the name of it now, but it's a speaker who talks about what it means to be face to face. And so many people ask, what can we do for Maui? How can we help? And people who are not Hawaiian or not from here, will often feel like, how do I feel belonging? And so I think this poem speaks to that positive connection. If we want to connect, regardless of who we are and where we come from and what we believe, the one thing that we can always do is be face to face. So, it says, he alo a he alo. That's how you learn about what makes us weak. He alo a he alo. That's how you learn about what makes us bleed. He alo a he alo. That's how you learn about what makes us feel, what makes us work, what makes us sing, what makes us bitter, what makes us fight, what makes us laugh, what makes us stand against the wind, what makes us sit in the flow of power, what makes us us. Not from a distance, not from miles away, not from a book, not from an article you read, not from the newspaper, not from what someone told you, not from a reliable source, not from a cliff, not from a cave, not from your reality, not from your darkness, but he alo a he alo, face to face. Or else, ha'ako kawaha, shut tight your mouth. A ohe o kahi na na o luna o kapali iho mai alalo nei. Ike ao nui ke ao ike he alo a he alo. The top of the cliff isn't the place to look at us. Come down here and learn the big and the little current face to face, and come and help us dig the lo'i deep. So when I'm feeling so sad about all of the things, no housing, not enough money, not enough food, like what are the things that we need to do? And I think it is the one that we can't control a lot, but the one thing that we can do is kind of decide to engage face to face, even though it can be very painful and very challenging. Sometimes it's so much easier to stay up on that hill and just project and wish, So, but thank you for listening to it. I found it just like literally a month ago, and it really, as I go to talk and work in disaster work, which I find so challenging. I don't know how people do this work all the time. It's so taxing. Or, much of the work that we all do is so taxing sometimes that to be able to kind of manifest those voices and remember that there is a way forward. We just have to decide to take it. So, and be together. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Pualani. Thank you, Paul. Thank you, Nalani, as well, for being a wonderful addition to our conversation today, and just everyone else who joined us today. Thank you so much. Greatly appreciate you all. This is truly just more like a passion project, these virtual talk stories, just getting folks together, not restricted by, uh, water, land, politics, just coming together to have conversation about wherever they may go around different topics. So always looking for seeing where this journey goes. We've been doing it for a little over 4 years now. So it's been truly a blessing and a joy. So thank you all for allowing me to continue on in this journey myself. So thank you.
Mahalo, aloha.
Aloha.